With so many years of experience in the industry, what do you think is the best way startups, especially people who are starting the early stage, middle stage, growth stage startup, what are the best ways they can communicate with investors, the best ways they can share their stories? And when it comes to investment, what are the tricks and the tricks to be able to get investment or engage an investment company?
Okay, brilliant. Um, so let's take this in two stages, I'll say. There's the early stage, which I'm sure a lot of you are in right now, and then there's the growth stage, which is a bit more complex. So early stage, um, typically you're trying to get your idea off the ground. You're not sure how to um, uh, what do you call it? You're not sure how to get hold of financing and so on. So how do you go about it? Typically, you want a product that people want. You want to build a product that people want to um, uh, buy, or a service that people want to participate in. Um, what you really need to be doing is making sure that your product is sound and it's gotten off the ground. For example, a few days ago, someone sent me a concept that he had to try and pique my interest and see what I thought. So I took a look at it, and it's a pretty good idea. The problem is he's got no customers. And so in my communication back to him, I communicated that I thought the product was a good idea, but the next stage then is to get some customers on board using it on a regular basis. When you do that, it's a proper illustration of of how your service works and what it could potentially grow to be. When you have an idea, it's just an idea. You need to be able to to make it come to life in that manner, and then people embrace it and are happy to work with you to to grow it and move your operation forward. So that's the first bit. Um, as you as you deepen your market presence, um, you need to be aware of your costs, because when you're creating a startup, costs tend to drown a lot of these ventures away. Um, the reason, of course, being that you don't have endless supply of money. Money is scarce and so on, and so there's only so much you can do. So you need to be careful with money and make sure that it goes a long way as much as possible. Um, Once you can prove to investors that you can control costs effectively whilst growing the venture, you definitely will gain trust. You yourself, you have uh, confidence in what you're doing because of how it's running, and that confidence comes across to the investors as well. Um, People do this in all sorts of ways. We have a company on our portfolio, an ed tech company, and what they've tried to do is keep themselves afloat one way or the other. And so they've participated in angel fairs, competitions, and so on. And some of these, when you win, you get a decent sum of money, sometimes maybe 10, 15, $20,000, and that can take you a bit of a way down the line to see your venture growing the way you need it to. Um, it's also good to network a lot with your peers, other entrepreneurs, network with other companies that are relevant to you. So, for instance, some of the telecom companies love for entrepreneurs to approach them because one way or the other, sorry, I'm talking about tech companies here. One way or the other, when they get to see these new companies, it gives them ideas of where the future is going, and they build strong links with you. One such example is Hubtel, which used to be called SMSGH. They had very good connections with all the telecom companies, and they all loved them and helped them to develop their ideas because in the end, their ideas utilized their networks for data and also utilized it for SMS messages and then sometimes even mobile money. So don't feel uh, threatened by the telecom companies. Approach them, make friends in some of them, and you'll find that it will probably take you a long way. That's for the tech oriented companies. There's other companies, obviously, here, like maybe health and agric and so on. Find your relevant partners in industry or bigger players in industry and just network with them. You'll find that it will benefit you long run. So a bit about government, sorry. Sometimes you find that government laws don't quite line up with your startup. And so it may be good to um, try and align as much as possible. I've seen it in several countries happen where when you don't align, then actually government in their bid to carry out their function, it begins to pull the startup down to the extent that maybe you have to close down because of one reason or the other. So it's good to align yourself well and so on. Let me give you an example again. I recently worked with a telecom company to sort out their business development. And in the process of doing that, you realize they had some services that were running in a manner that the government didn't, but the government had made laws against. And so I brought that to light. And what we did was write a letter explaining that some of our services were not properly aligned, but it wasn't a case of them trying to break the law, but a case of them trying to make things easier on their customers. And in so doing, it looked like they were breaking the law. And so they approached the NCA and they were able to negotiate and they were let off and allowed to continue to run their services in the manner they were doing. So that's early stage. In early stage as well, you probably want to be looking at your things like your cap tables. Your cap tables are how you record whoever's got shares in your company. Sometimes it can get quite messy, especially when investors put money in. So let me illustrate this again. Imagine that a company, all excited, has an investor come on board, and the investor has probably taken 40% shares, and the 40% shares maybe cost $1 million. Now, you've reached a stage where you need more capital, and another investor comes along, and remember that 30% was given for $1 million. Now, maybe this company is coming with $5 million, and because you've given away all these shares, then there's not enough space for this shareholder to come in without diluting the old company. Sometimes this gets a bit messy, and so rule of thumb, when you're taking money from investors, have in mind the future. So you don't put too much, you don't give too much equity away. Otherwise, it can come back and make things messy later on when you have more and more investors coming in. To do that, I think the best way is to get hold of a good finance person, not accountant, finance person who can help you to make sense of the numbers. I say not accountant because an accounting function is very different from a finance function, where the finance function is function helps you to understand the levers in the business that much better and how you're going to approach the future. The accountant is very good for recording what's happened in the past and able to help you with things like filing your taxes and companies' returns and so on. They are very good at those things. But when it comes to finance, you really need a finance person to be able to run your numbers properly and get more sense out of what you're doing for the future. I think at this point, has anyone got questions? We'll take some questions and then continue on.
Yes, before we go deep into the questions from the cohort members, I would also like you to tell us about Shanko Capital, what you do, and how many companies you have invested in so far.
Okay, so Chanzo Capital is, Chanzo is a Swahili word, by the way, which means seed, basically. And so that was coined by my partner, Eric. And he's actually set the company up somewhere in 2014. And he was running it by himself, investing into small companies and bringing them up along the way. So we're a growth equity fund, and we're able to support companies who need money in the region of around $500,000 to $5 million. We typically like to take up a minority stake in companies because we believe that the entrepreneurs we should back should be solid businessmen who can stand firm and run their businesses. That being said, we know that in these markets, Africa specifically, the venture scene is not well developed. So there's a lot of gaps. And of course, that's why we're talking this evening. What we try and do is mentor them, form a community, and then also provide capital. So we have a few online fora that we engage with for competitions, for mentoring, for also, in fact, sorry, we have an angel fair, I wanted to say. The angel fair we run once a year, and we take the best of the companies that we've met through a 12-month period, and we bring them together in a location around Africa somewhere. The latest one we did was Senegal during COVID. We did it virtually, and it mainly had companies from Senegal participating. And so out of that competition, we have a few winners. There's no prizes or anything, but of course there's investors present, and what they do is network with members of this investment community that we invite to do deals. It is our hope for each of these events that deals happen, and so far we've done approximately $23 million worth of deals. We're situated in Accra, in Nairobi, in Joburg, and in Mauritius as well. And so that's it on Chanzo Capital and what we do.
Awesome. I already have some questions coming from the cohort members. I think I have a question from Siani, and he's based, he's currently in Ghana, and he wants to know, just picking up the questions. Okay, he wants to know, at what business cycle does Shanzo generally have appetite to invest?
Okay, we typically take from growth stage, early stage. See, early stage is the most risky stage and a stage where a lot of companies fail. And so what happens is once you get past that stage, your survivability is a lot more assured, I'd say. And so we tend to invest when you're cash flow positive, meaning you're making money, and then also you're ready to hit significant growth. So that typically tends to be second, third year of a company's life, typically. And so from that stage onwards, we're able to mentor you properly, especially when you want to go into Africa, into other countries. We're able to help you, advise you, and actually walk with you into some of these countries since we have presence across the continent.
Okay, thank you. I think Nana has a question or a follow-up question to ask. Nana, can you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So I was going to pick you up on the last statement you made about giving away, not giving away too much of your equity. The question is, how much is too much?
Okay. There's not a hard and fast way to do this. It's more of an art than a science, I would say. So the things you would consider are, for instance, what's your revenue like? How much asset base do you have within the company, and so on. When you're looking at someone bringing money in, there's something we call pre-money and then post-money. Pre-money is before the investment comes in. And so what your company is worth along with the investment gives you your post-money. So for instance, maybe your company is worth 100,000 in terms of the assets and revenue you have currently, and you're taking on $1 million. Then post money will be the 100,000 plus $1 million, which gives you $1.1 million. Now the difficulty there is, how do you value a startup? There's a few methods that you can use. People try and use traditional methods. Others try and use other methods like comparables to a similar startup, possibly in a similar sort of environment, and based on a few things which may be similar or more positive in terms of revenue or value terms, or more negative in terms of revenue and value terms. You've considered all these factors, and then you're able to work out probably how much your company is worth. So based on that, then when you're taking the decision to take financing, you can figure out how much shareholding maybe to give away based on your current value. Also, you need to think of how much your company is going to grow. Maybe it's only going to grow 10 times as large as it is now, and so what you give away should probably be reflecting that as well. It may be able to grow 100 or 1,000 times as big as what it is today. You also need to be cognizant of that and try and factor that into your valuation as realistically as possible. So there's no hard and fast way. You have to take all these factors, weigh them up, and then eventually come up with what seems like a good figure. But typically, giving away more than 20 to 30% means that later on, you should be aware that you may have problems with other investors coming in, especially when it's a very big company. For instance, imagine Flutterwave. If they had given away a lot of equity at the beginning, how could they comfortably bring in the what do you call it, venture capital people from the US without significantly diluting the initial investors' shareholding? When it gets to those points, the incumbent investors tend to take up entrenched positions because their interest is typically being diluted, and they don't like that. And so you weigh up all of this, and you get yourselves into a situation where it should be favorable for everyone moving forward. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, that's very comprehensive. The other one, you talked about, the point where you start investing in a company, you talk about growth stage. I'm more concerned about, one, when you say growth, are they certain specific numbers you're looking at in terms of cash flow and customer base? And then also, if you can talk a little about sort of corporate governance in terms of structure. Are you looking at things you consider? For example, is it are there any partners, or is it a single founder? Things like that to give assurance. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about growth stage first. I don't know if you're familiar with the term the hockey stick. So that typically is a graph, x-axis, y-axis, and then typically your starting point is a little bit above the x-axis and just to the right of the y-axis, and your journey or your revenue curve begins to go down because you're not really making much, and then it goes down, dips underneath the x-axis, and then begins to climb up and go up and up until it moves way to the right and then upwards on the y-axis. That's what's termed the hockey stick. So what typically happens is you started your company, you're spending money, you're not really making much, and so you enter negative territory, which they call the trough of despair. And this is the area where people fall off and the companies shut down typically, because it's quite a difficult stage. But once people go past that and they begin making money, then you find that the graph begins to move up and move upwards and continue to move up. And so once you get past the x-axis and you keep growing consistently, then we consider you to be in a tangible growth stage. And that's a good time for us then to begin to put money behind you to go through a number of growth cycles as you go along. Of course, what I've just described is theoretical, and so the trends are the trends are typically in that sort of manner. So that's the growth stage. We talk about corporate governance. Corporate governance, you need to pay attention to who you bring onto your companies. So typically you should have a committee or a board. Okay, so first let's start with a board. You should have a board of directors aside your management team who can advise you and make sure that you're taking the right decisions. The composition of your board should typically be an odd number, so 3 or 5 is ideal, so that when you vote, you're able to have a majority. People on your board should be people who are seasoned, uh, preferably in the investment area, or generally solid in business, and they should be able to speak the truth to you, and you should be able to what do you call it? You should be able to take the truth from them and act on it, basically. In terms of your management team, the more you have solid leaders in your company, the better people will take to your company. You need to inspire confidence. Is basically the issue here. If you're not able to inspire confidence, then it's unlikely that you will get investors. Your board should be able to help you get investment. So it's advisable to get people who have good networks that you can leverage on to reach some early investors. Because this tends to be a game where what do you call it? It's uh, almost a who you know sort of thing. If you're not well networked, people are not really happy to part with money to you because, of course, they don't want to have their fingers burnt by someone they don't know, basically. Of course, someone who they know um, could could do badly with their business, but at least what it is they have more of a chance of knowing whether this person is going to succeed or not, and that's pretty much why you would have to look at that. Um, in terms of your books, you need to keep meticulous accounts. I find that that's really helpful because it paints a picture of your company and what you're doing and the milestones where you've come from and so on. And I must say the same about or the regular meetings, weekly or monthly. You should keep minutes of meetings so they can, when people are doing due diligence, they can see what's happened through the company all the way until present time. It helps them to understand your business that much better than what they themselves are getting into. Um, so I think that's what I could share with you on corporate governance. I don't know if I've answered that question as well.
Yeah, very insightful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Uh, okay, thank you, Alan, for your answers. I want to ask, did you start MP Limited?
Yes, I did actually. That was
Oh,
back
okay.
in,
And
sorry, go
sorry,
on.
please go ahead. No, please go ahead.
I started MP back in 2016 when there wasn't much by way of payment systems and so on. It started as a way to migrate airtime resellers from the scratch cards as we knew it back then to an electronic variant. So I was able to put a prototype together. In fact, the owners of some people put money behind me to do this on their behalf. And so I was able to prove the concept, and then we were able to bring on a number of resellers, and it worked seamlessly. And so they decided that we should move ahead and grow it into a company. And so we brought on several hundred resellers. We had a sales team in place, a tech team, and so on. And it just grew from there. Currently, it doesn't do the reseller model anymore. It's more concentrates on B2B. So it has a number of B2B partners, which you may not have heard of because they're all working in the background for different telecom entities. The ones you may know are Express Pay. So when you buy airtime from Express Pay, it's actually coming from the MPay platform. and there's others. They also have a few links into DSTV, yeah, so multi-choice, yeah, and other services like WIAC and so on. So you may not have come across them on the street, but they are in the background working in tandem with other companies.
Great. I was thinking if the company is still in existence or you sold it for some $1 million and what happened to the company. Good to know it's still
Okay.
active.
Yeah. Well, I had a nice bonus check at the end of a few years, and I walked away after that.
Okay, good to know. But I mean, what I want to ask is, you started the company with seed capital from a group of investors. How did
That's
that happen? With starting a company in Ghana, and most of these startups can attest to that, that it's difficult to get connection to investors, especially at early stage. And I know you mentioned that you should network, and in the area of investment, it's more about who you know. And can you give us any how you did it, and if these startups also want to get seed capital, is it possible in Ghana? And also, you are focused. I have so many questions, so you take them, and then I will come. And then cohort members, if you have any question, please raise your hand, and I'll call you.
good. Okay, so let's start with seed capital. Seed capital is a bit difficult to come by in Ghana, but it's not impossible. Um, when people um, when people try to start a venture, as I said earlier on, um, you need to get the company to a point where you're making money. Um, as a lecturer of mine put it long, long ago, he said, if the dogs are not eating the dog food, then it's not it's not a good product, basically. So his alluding to dogs means if your dog is not going to eat your food, which he normally would do, then of course, then there's something wrong with the food. So if you have customers, so if you have a product or a service and no one's patronizing it, then it obviously is not resonating with the client base. And what we try and do with a business is to put structures around a product or a service that is valuable to people want to use. So if they're not going to use it, then of course it's no good. So let's assume that you've gotten past that challenge. You have a viable product or service. So how are you going to get capital behind it? The first port of call is always your immediate circles, your friends, your family, or people who think that they can take a risk on you and put money into the business. You can basically you can go through this small circle of yours and see about getting financing first. If it works, then of course you can um, take yourself through your next phase. And I think one thing I must say is when you're looking for seed capital, you should be specific in the milestones you're trying to reach or the objectives you're trying to reach. Maybe you have a product and maybe you want to test the market and you need seed capital to do that. You can always say to your investor that, look, I am using your money to carry out these tests. I expect XYZ results. And based on that, then I can go to the next stage. It means you won't get your money now, but once I can go through the next few stages, then of course I may be able to pay you back. It's an equity sort of arrangement. An equity is not a loan. So uh, you're in one sense not obliged to pay it back if the company fails, But then in another sense as well, you want to be responsible because otherwise you would be known as someone who can't be trusted with money because you just burn money. And so what you must do is make sure that you have this responsible attitude towards using the money to achieve certain milestones. You must execute on what you say you're going to execute on. And once you do that, you gain trust. And so, of course, maybe you've gone through a milestone and you've gotten so far, you've got the results, you're able to show your investor, this is where I've gotten to. And so I'm moving on to the next stage now. When you get into that habit, you find that it's easier to raise money because you yourself, you know what you're doing. You know that you're going stage by stage. There's the temptation to just say, oh, let's start, let's see where we get to. That's dangerous. You should be specific on your goals. And that kind of keeps you on the road um, towards higher and higher achievements. And sorry, I've gone in roundabouts, but that's your approach. And then from there, after you've gone through your friends, family, and people who can, uh, um, what do you call it, spare money to you, you're probably going on to a stage where um, you're getting customers, and so you can show your revenue numbers as proof of their business working. And so you can approach more formal people like angel investors and so on. I say angel investors because that's the typical next port of call. Um, so how would I choose an angel investor? So maybe I have a product that aligns with the pharmaceutical industry. So then I write a nice proposal which details what my product does, and it details what I'm trying to achieve for my next stage and the deliverables that will come out of it. And then I begin to approach significant players within the pharmaceutical industry to see if they would align and put some money behind me. Um, of course, people fear that, hey, they'll take my idea and run away with it. There is that danger, but I would not worry too much about that. Of course, you take some steps for that not to happen, such as NDAs and so on. But I wouldn't worry too much because starting a business is really hard. And yes, it could be easier for a bigger player, but it's not so easy because you have to find the right people. You have to know what the entrepreneur knows to effectively be competing on that level with him. So it's not always easy. To give you an example, today you see Twitter has been bought by Elon Musk. Why didn't he just go and try and build one himself? It's just difficult. Donald Trump tried to build a media channel. No one's heard of it. I couldn't even tell you the name if I tried to. So that's how hard it is to do some of these things. So I wouldn't worry too much and be fixated on someone who's going to steal your idea. It almost always never happens unless your idea is very what do you call it? It's easy to copy, and in that case, then is it really a strong business proposition? Will people really want to put their money behind something that everyone can copy? So those are the thoughts you should be thinking about. So when you get past this seed sort of stage, and angels have helped you to move to the next stage, then you begin to talk to the likes of Chanzo Capital and so on. There are a few there are a few venture capital companies around these days. Not too many. There's us. I know there's Injaro Investments, and there's a few others out there. But you find that the nature of venture capital means that you can get financing from outside, from places like Nairobi, Nigeria, for instance. Nigerians are happy to invest in Ghana because it's just next door, and they tend to have quite a lot of money. So if you have connections in Nigeria, I urge you to explore that market extensively. And Ivory Coast is good for sourcing capital as well. We regularly talk to people in these two markets. Other markets you can consider are the obvious Middle East, US, UK, and funnily enough, China and Japan. There's investors that are eyeing companies in Africa and putting money behind them. So those are the typical places you look to for capital. Just look on the web. There's venture capital associations in a lot of these countries, and there's also angel investor associations in all these countries that you can approach. LinkedIn is a good source to find investors and reach out to them. My problem, though, is when you reach out blindly to investors, it's not very likely you'll get money from them because they don't know you. As I said, the network is always king. So if you have connections to be able to introduce you to these people, it always helps as well.
I see a hand up from Kwame. But Kwame, before you come, I want to be a little bit hard on Alan. I want to know, number one, if it's difficult to get companies to invest in with the criteria Shanzo Capital is looking at. And my second question is, why are you focused on growth stage companies since most companies in Africa are actually looking for seed money to survive their first stage of business?
Okay, so I'll answer the growth stage question first, and then the first question was, can you please remind me?
Is it difficult to get companies to invest in?
Okay, we'll come back to that. Yeah.
In the
Okay, so
countries that we operate in.
Yeah. So first of all, with the venture capital space, as I mentioned earlier, it is a very risky stage. That's when companies start. That's where most money is lost. And what happens is, as investors, we are not investing our own money. We're investing money that people have given to us, knowing that they're going to make an X amount minimum return. And so, in one sense, our hands are tied. So we need to make sure that we're seeing to our investors' interests. And so that forces us, well, in Chanzo Capital's terms, that forces us to invest in the growth stage. Some companies decide to invest in the seed and early stage. It's all well and good. And sometimes it's a game of numbers. So what needs to happen is, if you're investing early stage, then the amounts you can give the companies are smaller. And then you have to give to a lot of companies. So for instance, maybe the average amount an early stage investor will give is maybe $20,000 to $50,000, and they'll be able to spread that $20,000 to $50,000 among, say, 50 to 100 companies, knowing that maybe only 10 will return a profit and move to the higher level. So you can see that it's very risky. And so that's some of the constraints. But that being said, I would say that it's not a problem that we face only in Africa. It's a global problem. Starting companies it's incredibly challenging sometimes. And so some people may have done it once and they've succeeded. Kudos onto them, but a lot of the time it is quite hard work and full of disappointments and failures. But once you get past that, early stage and you can show revenue, maybe some profits, and show decent growth, it gets easier because there's a client base behind you. Your idea is proven. Your model is solid. You're actually even improving the model of your product or your service or its features. And so your likelihood of getting more customers becomes a lot higher. And so that's what takes you to the next level and onwards. And so yeah, it is a problem, but this is the best way we've been able to solve it at the moment. I see that there's websites coming up, portals of venture capital companies where they get people to come online, they mentor them, the accelerator sort of model, they mentor them for so many weeks, put a bit of capital behind them and get them going. And I think that that model will probably evolve in Africa as well, where you'll be seeing portals where you can what do you call it? Get your company on there, go through the cycle of getting mentoring and networking and so on, some capital, and that all helps to strengthen the proposition and make it that much easier for companies to thrive. So, looking at Chanzo Capital's unique position, um, our investment thesis, we have to sell a story. So our story is we can seek out growth companies and mentor them and grow them into the continent consistently. And in so doing, we give you X amount of return at the end of 5 to 10 years. That's the story we're selling. And so now, when we look in the marketplace, of course, we've looked in the marketplace to create this story. So now, looking in the marketplace in Ghana, for instance, we're looking at the e-commerce space, we're looking at the clean tech space, we're looking at agri tech, we're looking at education tech, and we're looking at fintech. So looking at these areas, you'd agree with me that there's a fair few fintechs around, some that you haven't even heard of, like MPay. There's ExpressPay, there's Hubtel, there's Dreamoval, there's all sorts. And then now going over to Nigeria, there's Flutterwave, there's Interpay, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of movement in that part of the market. Why? Because there's demand for the services. It's a growth industry. It's a new industry and it's growing. So there are opportunities for us to back certain companies and move them forward. In terms of agri-tech, there's a company called Farmerline, who we've been working with. We intentionally looked in the agri area because we see that technology can, what do you call it, change our fortunes significantly with its application into agriculture. And so that's why we looked into that area. Aside Farmerline, there's a few others that we're looking into. In the e-commerce space, you see that Hubtel has done some fintech. Now it's moving into the e-commerce area. Why? Because it's growing. We have Jumia, Hubtel themselves have grown significantly through the COVID period, and it's helped them to thrive that much better, making them even more attractive to go out into the African continent. So it's looking at the trends, looking at how we can leverage on these trends to bring new ways of doing things to market. That's informs how we back companies and help them to grow and move on into wider markets.
Okay, that explains everything. Kwame, please, you can unmute your mic and ask your question now. And please, if you want to talk, just it's time for questions. Just raise your hand and unmute and talk as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Aidan, for your presentation. It's been very great listening to you from my end. So I have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. So the first one is that, in my opinion, sometimes because of the growth of the venture capital and then the private equity ecosystem or space globally, what you find is that startups or entrepreneurs have become more investment minded. So you find many firms or many startups building companies with the goal of raising funds. And so when they get to the point where they raise funds, it's like they've arrived in a way. So my question is that, also let me add this preamble. I also believe that sometimes there are certain invaluable lessons that are learned when the growth of a company is sort of like organic and they don't raise capital um, in the early stage of the company, or they don't raise capital at all. Also, I think a while ago, I read an article where someone was of the view. I think the writer of the article was propounding that um, there was a way. So it was that the customer founded business. So there was a way startups could raise money by leveraging on the upfront payment of their customers. So my question is that should all startups raise capital? And at what point in the journey of a startup should funds be raised? So that is my first question. My second question is that I know there are different kinds of funding. So there is equity funding, there is debt financing or debt funding, and among other funding vehicles that entrepreneurs can use. Um, in what instances can we use, say, equity funding, and in what instances can we also use, say, debt financing? If you could throw more light on that for me. I know you are also speaking from the perspective of somebody who is a player within the private equity space, but from the perspective of an entrepreneur, if let's say we are raising equity funding, okay, and then we don't want to give away so much equity, what are some of the strategies that we can use? I believe that there are certain strategies that we can use to our advantage so that we don't give away too much equity. And then my last question is, beyond the money that startups are looking out for, okay, because sometimes if you're a startup and then you are in need of money, sometimes you don't look beyond the money that you are getting from a particular investor. Once you get available money from an investor, you just jump on the offer and then you move. So what are some of the things that we should look out for beyond the money before we take funding from a particular investor, or before even partnering with a particular private equity firm? So these are the questions that I want you to address for me. Thank you very much.
That's good. Good questions, I must say. Okay, so the first question, you asked about how gosh,
So
I've lost my train of thought. Can
okay, so
you
my first
please
question was, should all
repeat that?
startups raise capital, and at what
Oh,
point
yes.
in the lifespan of a startup should that capital be raised?
Excellent. So no, startups, basically, you don't necessarily have to raise money if you don't need it. You raise money when you need it. And typically you raise money to invest in an asset that will further grow your business broadly, or you cycle because maybe you need to invest in sales and marketing stuff, or you need to do some significant marketing and so on. So typically that's money. there is the unfortunate issue of people thinking that once you raise money from an investor, that means you're up and running and that's the end of the world. But actually, that's the beginning of your story, the beginning of you trying to go on to greater and greater heights. Because this money you take in, you're actually supposed to use to I don't know, furnish the business and make it that much stronger. The habit of buying flashy vehicles and so on, it really is not that necessary. Or plush offices and so on, it really is not that necessary. What you should really be looking at is how far have I gone into my journey of where my vision is supposed to be. And so you should, what do you call it, have a bold vision of where the business is going. Maybe you're doing $50,000 per annum today. You should have a bold vision. Can I make this thing go to $20 million? You know, how am I going to make it happen? And so on. Unfortunately, in our environments, we tend to have small companies that thrive, and so we get satisfied with just the small takings we have, and go to bed. But what we should really be doing is um, trying to thrive to go higher and higher, not for higher and higher sake. I would say that there should be an overarching purpose behind what you're doing. What do you call it? In a lot of other countries, for instance, Jumia wants to cover Africa and provide e-commerce services for Africans, and so that's their overarching purpose. And so as you what do you call it? As you set up your business and go higher and higher, you should think about this bigger purpose you're appealing to, and that can definitely help you to take your business to the next level. In terms of uh, um, what you use your money for, you should be using it on assets around you. You should be using it for your equipment, your servers, you know, or a process. You probably need to develop a certain process, and you use it to develop that, or you probably need to use it to expand the business. Use it to do that instead of other frivolous activities. So that's the growth bit. You also asked, you asked about equity.
Yeah, equity and then debt
equity and
financing. Yeah, and the other
yeah.
ways of raising funds when we can use either of these methods of raising funds.
Right. Okay. So equity is the most expensive because you have to give up a portion of your company. When you give up a portion of your company, it's a bit like you're marrying someone, and it's quite literally that. Um, because you're bringing someone into the picture and they're going to take this journey with you every day, all day until they decide to exit. So is that person going to be compatible with you in the workspace? Even if they're not working with you, are they going to be compatible with you during those shareholder meetings? Those are considerations you need to take on board. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning that if you can take people that are well seasoned, well responsible, and you have a certain level of respect or rapport with them, it helps you to, what do you call it, make the right choices of the people you introduce into the business. Because if you have the wrong type of person, it can severely affect your business. Sometimes it can even collapse it. I've known people to be on a board of directors of a business and also executives within the business, and they had serious falling outs. And then in the end, some had to be voted off the board and dismissed from the business and paid off to go on their own. So you need to make wise choices when you're looking for equity investors. And equity, of course, your equity is long term. So we're talking 5-10 year horizon, or even longer in some cases. So is the and so on and so forth. Are you and what should you be using this money for? It's for your long term objectives. So maybe you're looking at expanding over a 5-year period, or maybe you're looking at equipment that will depreciate over a 5-10 year horizon. That's when you use this sort of equity to finance these sorts of things. When it comes to debt, debt is a bit more short term. And of course, you shouldn't also take on too much debt. So typically, I look at it like banks do. A business shouldn't take on too much, anything more than 40%, to be honest, should be sitting on your books as debt. And remember that debt takes seniority over equity. So when you take on debt and you fall into problems, your debtors are going to come for you and you need to pay them first. And so that also dictates how much you should take, having that in mind if things should go wrong. You need to pay them first before you can even pay the equity holders. And so those are the things you should think about in terms of what you should use debt for. Maybe, I don't know, short-term cash flow issues. Maybe you're going through so much growth that you don't have enough liquidity to finance the everyday operations. So you take on some debt to finance for a period, knowing that once you go through the growth cycle, you'd have enough revenue now to pay off the debt and take control of whatever cash flow management issues you have. You could also use it for just short-term measures, basically. Maybe you need to test something, so you use that debt to be able to carry out the tests, knowing that if it succeeded or if it failed, you can pay back gradually, maybe over a 2 or 3 year period without too much risk. So debt is a lot riskier, basically, than equity, and so for the entrepreneur. So that's what you need to keep your eye on.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Those were good.
Thank you for your answers. If you have any questions, please, this is the time to ask. But I want to ask a question when it comes to structure. I want to take us back to structure. You mentioned we should do proper bookkeeping. We should do a couple of things to be able to. It will give us a clean organization if you want to talk to an investor. I want to ask, is it possible for an organization without enough funding? You all know that even when you ask someone for $1,000 in Ghana, it will be very difficult to get. But is it possible for a startup organization to grow their business and to also have a proper structure? Because it all has to do with paying human resource to be able to do that. Is it possible to grow your organization effectively without having any form of funding? And is it also the reason why we have a lot of mom and pop startups who can scale globally to other countries?
Okay, so it's a bit of a a problem on both sides, to be honest. I would like to view this through slightly different lens. So mom and pop shops, they are typically set up to cater for the everyday needs of the family. And by and large, once they cater for those needs, they're satisfied. They don't typically want to grow that much further. Those who want to are able to expand significantly and move on to the next level. So I'm going to use an example. I'll use uh, okay, Nyaho Hospital is probably not the right one, but there's a few clinics. Rabito Clinic, for instance, was just one premises, a house, when it started, and now it's grown and it has a few branches around. Now that's someone who clearly was not satisfied with just one clinic and decided to expand and have got probably 3 or 4 other locations around Accra now. So when the will is there, they can definitely expand. So there's that, what do you call it, mindset of just catering for needs. And then there's a mindset as well of people who want to take things that much further. When you take the category of people who want to take things that much further, then of course your vision has to be significantly more larger. You got to be more ambitious, more driven. You got to work harder and everything. And there's obviously so many less people that are willing to do that. And so that also contributes to why we don't have so many of those. But then again, as I said earlier, these are global phenomena. You go to the west or to the east, and the same sort of things exist where you see a lot of small mom and pop shops. Then you have standard SMEs as we know it, with probably 5, 10, 15 people. Then you have mid-sized companies that are more like 50 to 100 people. And then you have larger corporates. So it's prevalent. I would say that we are in our circumstances because we're up and coming, basically. But you see that the same proportions sort of exist within what we have, where there's just just a few corporates, then there's a lot more medium-sized companies, and then plenty more mom and pop shops. So the important point here is your vision. You need to make sure that your vision can help you scale to the next level till you get to where you want to.
Okay. Thank you. Check in if anyone. I see a hand up. A minute. If your hand is up, Nana, please unmute and then ask your question.
So, yeah, what I wanted to ask is, with Shanzo, do you have any, as part of your vision, you talked about the companies, or not, well, at the stage that you start investing. As part of your vision, do you have sort of like helping startups like us get to that point where you start investing?
Yes, indeed, Kwame, yes. So I'm not allowed to mention names, but we have several companies in the background that we've been helping ad hoc. I think there's a recent one that has some educational software and hardware system. And what they needed was a lot of help on their board structure and then their shares and so on. And we were happy to do that for them without too much fuss. And in the end, I introduced them to a valuer because they wanted to do a valuation after that. And so we're happy to help. Um, you know, all sorts of requests come from people we decide to help. But what we try and do is you must show some promise. I mean, we we don't have all the time in the world, and so we try and be strategic as well. So if we have a chat and we think that we can help you and this is going to result in something good, we will go ahead and do that. It's not hard and fast, where what do you call it? You must meet some criteria, otherwise we won't help you. But at the same time, we also need to be wise and use our resources wisely. So yeah,
Right. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
that's fine.
Okay, Newton, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, my question is related to valuation. My question is, are we advised to actually seek the service of the professional valuer at this stage to know how valuable our company, our startups are, in order to be probably equipped psychologically equally on how much we are playing on already?
Okay, so that is a good question indeed. Valuation, I wouldn't, in the initial stages, if you're not going to use the the valuation document for anything, I don't think you should worry yourself too much. I mean, what you could do is figure out how valuations are done for your company type in your industry. There's lots of stuff on the web, and sometimes it's revenue multiple, for instance. So your typical, let's say your typical e-commerce company, your revenue multiples are probably going to be in the region of 10x to 15x of your revenue. So imagine you were doing what do you call it, $1 million per annum, then it's likely that your valuation is going to be between 10 and 15 million dollars. So there's ballpark figures like that that can give you an idea of where you should end up. As I said, you know, it's an art. It's not a hard and fast science. So you've got to weigh up all, different factors to come up with the figure. But doing it roughly, stuff you find from Google searches allows you to have an idea of where you should be ending up for evaluation. However, when you're going for formal venture capital, it definitely is part of the requirements that you get a formal valuation done as part of people's money is involved in a very legal sort of framework. So you need to do it properly in those cases. Does that help?
Yes, very much, very much, very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, let me see if there is any question. No question from the cohort. I want to ask, what do you invest in as an investment company? Do you invest in the team, the company, or the products?
Thank you. I intended to talk about that actually, and it slipped me. So what we typically look at initially is your idea. Is it scalable? Will it really move and get to the levels that is required of us to be able to return to our investors? That's what we typically look at. But then, of course, you need to look at the team driving this. And so I would say once your idea checks out and it seems like it can do a certain level of growth, then we scrutinize the team and make sure that the team is able to achieve these numbers that they say they're going to achieve. Because of course, if the team can't achieve it, then the dream is not, you can't realize it, basically. So all in all, though we look at certain criteria, the team is probably the most important bit. The CEO, the CTO, the CMO, and so on. If they're not solid and they don't look like they're a cohesive team, then it's likely that it won't happen. So we look at that as our most important factor, and then everything else fits around it as the criteria that we need to also meet to satisfy our investors.
Yes, and I also want you to share more light on some of the red flags or things that have made you not to invest in companies that you've identified or companies that you want to nurture. And yes, I want you to throw more light on that.
Right. So I think the biggest one for us is integrity. You need to be able to work in a manner where your investors should be able to trust you. Because if they can't trust you, then what shows that you're going to be able to meet the milestones? It goes beyond issues such as theft and so on. It goes beyond that. What I'm advocating here is you should be able to um, you're the entrepreneur, you know your skills, you know how your team, you know your capabilities. And so if you say you're going to bring 20 clients on board, then we shouldn't just see 10 clients on board. At worst, we should be seeing maybe 18 clients on board. Or at best, of course, you can go higher if you want. So for me, in something like that, it's sometimes good to under promise but over deliver, because that builds trust, for instance. Another one is communication. You should be able to communicate effectively. We had a gentleman who was raising funds with us, and we found him a suitable investor. And then all of a sudden he got cold feet and he just wouldn't, talk to us or return our calls or anything. And I found that so strange. But what you learn from that is he was probably not willing to put the investment in, but he was also not willing to talk and share the reasons why he was thinking of not putting money in. At the end of the day, it's not you're not forced to do these things. You should be able to sit at the table and have a frank and honest discussion with your investors, basically. So communications is key, and not communicating means there's gaps in what the investor knows and then what's actually happening on the ground, which goes back to the whole trust thing. So it's like they're thinking X is going to happen, but Y is happening instead. And so having a good communication flow helps a lot to ensure that there's a cordial atmosphere and everyone's on the same page, basically, to take things forward. So those are a couple of red flags. I would say also the team cohesion thing. If the team is not together, I can't see how an investment is going to work. So when we have our meetings with entrepreneurs, we like to make sure that that cohesion is there and it's a safe atmosphere and everyone's able to air their views without being incriminated and so on and so forth. So those would be the top three for me.
Oh, okay. We just have some few minutes to go, and I would like to ask, well, maybe one or two questions more. So, for startups that do not have connections, do not know investors, am I wrong to say that you got seed funding for MPay because you were already in the industry and you knew people who could help you? Is it wrong for me to say that? So you had a leverage when it comes to finding investors and people who can help you. For startups that probably do not know anyone, they are struggling, they have wonderful ideas, wonderful products, and team cohesion, and all the things you've mentioned, what should they do?
Right. So certainly, I was in a privileged position, and I was actually approached and given the money to start the business, and so that's a very, very, very rare occurrence. But it goes back to the point: people must know you or know you, and somehow know what you're capable of, and that goes back to your initial product or service. If you don't have a working product or service, you're not going to be able to show that. So that must be number one key. Your product or service must be working to a degree and also must typically have some cash flow. Um, Now, if you're finding it difficult to uh, get that initial funding to get you going, then I advise that there's lots of competitions and so on, not just in Ghana, but globally. And some of these happen on Zoom calls and so on. And so seek them out. Just Google for competitions, and you'll see that there's so many globally. And join some of them, and when you join, you're able to interact with people. And so interact, try and get the contact details of some of these investors. And you'll be surprised at how quickly your fortunes will change. We as fundraisers, we've gotten some of our investors into Chanzo through this method of just participating in different events and networking afterwards. And eventually we've come up with a few investors that way. So it's good to reach out there, and build those links. You have to build them actively because they won't come to you. So it's something that you must spend time and do actively on a month by month basis. Um, if your average startup in your group, you do maybe probably about 3 to 5 competitions each year, I really think that you'll make a breakthrough and find some investors that way, or find some grant money or similar. It's good to just network widely, not just for competitions, but also these what do you call it, international bodies like MasterCard foundations especially. When you approach them and they like your idea, it lines up with some of their goals, they're happy to put money behind you without too much fuss.
Okay, join competitions, join hubs, connect, get more ideas. Do you have any closing remarks? We have about 10 minutes to go. Do you have closing remarks? As I mentioned, the InsurTech Accelerator Program is a 10-week intensive program. They've done speaker sessions online. They've gone through entrepreneurial sessions, sales sessions, different modules, and we are wrapping it up this Friday at Marriott Hotel with a pitch session. And of course, I'll send you an invitation. Do you have any advice for all these startups?
Right. It's a long journey, but those who persist will eventually start to reap the results. Um, there's what do you call it? Loads of failures on the way, but through those failures, there's a lot of learning as well. And so, my biggest advice to you is, um, you know, you have to stick to it. You have to be persistent. You have to just um, do what you can and just keep things going and just keep progressing daily. So long as you're making progress on a daily basis, you're reaching your goal. Sometimes it may not feel like it, but you just have to have that dogged determination and have your goal in sight always. And eventually you'll find that one fine day you wake up and you've actually succeeded at what you set out to do. That's my biggest advice I can give you on this. I think when I started thinking about private equity and venture capital, this must have been like around 2005. And it's only in 2018, 13 years later, that I found myself finally where I wanted to be. And it hasn't been easy, but at the same time, it's been a tremendous journey. I know so much more than I ever did. And it's just gotten to a point where the world has opened up out to us. We've strived and helped so many companies and so on. And so eventually our name is out there and we're actually being solicited to help in all sorts of areas. So, that's from a capitalist perspective, but it's the same sort of journey for an entrepreneur as well. I'm sure you've heard of M Pharma and so on. M Pharma started
Yeah.
long ago trying to verify medicines. It was very simple. It didn't look like it was going anywhere. And it's taken them over 10 years to really catch on and become something that society is finally embracing and wants to use to a large extent. But so long as I said, so long as you've got a few people using your product, and from your analysis and your what do you call it, your analysis and your research, that your product does have a future, you just have to pursue it, and in one fine day you'll get there. I can use Netflix as an example. Netflix tried to take over from Blockbuster Video, and it's taken them so long, but finally they are where they are today through all that effort. And now they actually do look the size of Blockbuster Videos, if not bigger than what Blockbuster Videos was back then. So it's a journey, but enjoy it. Don't worry too much about the downtimes, because through all that, if you have a down cycle, you definitely have an up cycle at some stage. So just enjoy it, learn as much as possible, and just be as valuable as possible to yourself and the people around you. And you'll find one fine day you'd have made it.
Okay, so thank you for that comment. So Shanzo Capital, do you have any upcoming events these startups can participate in now or
Um,
in the near future? Should they go to your website? Is there a way they can join your upcoming events as well?
Yes, indeed. What you'll probably have to do is just ping me on LinkedIn and leave me a message. And we do have events that we do from time to time. We just finished one last week with the Unicorn Network, where we organized an event for Ghana. And we had just about 8 startups come on, but it was quite a nice event. Just hit me up, and what we'll do is our Angel Fair will be organized during the year sometime. I just don't know where we'll be doing it next, but we'll be able to keep you informed and get you involved in one of these things we do in the future.
Thank you very much for spending time with us, and thank you for your dedication, your insights. We are very grateful. And on behalf of my team too, we say thank you. And we will definitely be in touch via email, and the cohort members as well. Please send an email to him, connect with him on LinkedIn, and you will have a bigger pool of people you can talk to. Thank you very much, everyone. If there is no question, we call it a day and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Florence, and thank you all.